He's like, not me. We drove a horse and buggy and were Old Order Mennonite for the first 27 years of our life. Then we left that religion. I've done this and it kind of backfired on me. The nature of social media is everybody gets to put their opinions out there. Because it's a dialect, like they would just criticize it and people would argue about it. If you say yes, then he comes over every Sunday night and you have a date in your home. He stays from 7 p.m. to midnight. I didn't even know what the word botulism meant. A lot of people would say everything I can is risky because I am somewhat of a rebel canner.
When you have to go from this to
meat in the freezer, we'll say, okay, now these are all meat birds. Come August, we're going to harvest all of these.
Did you ever think that you were going to go from canning for your family to canning for an audience online?
Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that's what I would be doing now.
Welcome to our Forjars podcast, and today's guest is RuthAnn Zimmerman.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I think these past few days we've gotten a chance to can together, get to know each other a little bit better. Loved following your page on Instagram, just getting to know you a little bit more. And I feel like this is a wonderful way for our viewers to get to know you. Maybe some questions that you haven't answered yet on any of your social media pages. Last time's podcast, we asked, who do you think the next guest? And we had many that reached out. We want Ruth. So it's exciting to have you here.
Thank you.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about your family?
My husband and I live on 20 acres in Northeast Iowa. We've lived there since we were, newlyweds, and all of our children were born there, other than our adopted children, of course, who we, brought home to the farmhouse. We are on a journey kind of back to the roots of our Old Order Mennonite heritage. We drove a horse and buggy and were Old Order Mennonite for the first 27 years of our life. Then we left that religion. Since that, we've realized some of the value of the culture, the self-sufficiency. We're trying to make sure that our 7 children grow up knowing the value of hard work and how to raise chickens, how to be self-sufficient.
Have you ever had anything happen in the kitchen while canning? Exploding jars, anything of the such?
It happens quite often, more often than you would think. And the reason people feel like they've made a mistake when it happens is because when we're filming, nobody's sharing that on social media.
They see all the edited versions of everything.
Yes, and I do try to show when I do make a mistake, show bits and pieces. Well, this happened. Here's what I'm going to do with it. So I'm trying to be more conscious of giving real expectations. Mm-hmm. But it especially happens towards the end of the season when I'm using jars that have been pushed to the back, and probably for a reason, or I'm maybe using jars that shouldn't be used in the pressure canner, things like that. I do see more exploding jars. The other time that I see exploding jars is when I try to rush things and I'm like, oh, that water's warm enough, and I put a hot jar into water that's too cool. Mostly it's my fault because I'm rushing. It feels costly when I'm doing meat, because meat is a long process and it's very valuable on my shelf. So if I have a canner full of 7 jars of beef and 1 explodes and now I only have 6, to me, that's a whole meal wasted.
It makes a difference.
Yes. But if it's green beans and I have hundreds of jars of green beans, I don't usually cry over
the same tear.
No.
What 3 points could you say that are like the top points that maybe beginners should follow to make sure that to avoid mistakes such as this?
So I think understanding the science behind it helps a lot. Mm-hmm. So understanding why you can't put a hot jar into cold water, just knowing that helps you not have to think about it because you understand the science behind it. And then the other thing is like understanding your low acid foods versus high acid foods, and hang a list on your refrigerator if that's how you need to remember. Use quality tools. Invest in good quality tools. That's going to make a big difference.
What would be a recipe that you would suggest for beginners?
My favorite thing to say to beginners when they ask me, where do I start? What is a good recipe? Is find something that your family likes. I could tell you canned green beans, but if your family doesn't like canned green beans, you're not going to be happy with the results. Mm-hmm. Salsa is one of my family's favorites. It's a lot of work to can salsa. So if I tell you you to can salsa, you're going to say that was too much work. So I would say find an item that you know your family likes and start there.
Living in Iowa, is that, you said that for 20 years that you've lived in the house that you are at now. Were you always in Iowa or lived somewhere else before that?
So I grew up in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I moved to Iowa to help my brother on his farm when I was 17. I think that would have been 97. And then we got married in the year 2000 and bought the 20 acres that we live on at the very end of that year. So we'll celebrate 25 years of marriage in May.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
25 years. I know after you've gone, I feel like past 10 years, you realize it's a lot, but then it's not a lot at the same time.
I feel like you're right. The first 10 years feel long. And then after that, it just feels like this is where I've always been.
Yeah, that's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit, because you did mention going back to the roots of the Mennonite community, but what about your heritage? Where are your ancestors originally from?
So our ancestors are originally from Switzerland, and then they were persecuted there because they didn't believe in baptizing their infants. So they moved to Germany, and then they lived there for 50 years, so an entire generation, more or less. And then from there, they came to the United States. Wow. So I have a Swiss-German heritage.
And so do you speak Pennsylvania Dutch?
Yes, so Pennsylvania Dutch is my primary language, which is also where a lot of people say, what's your accent? So it's Pennsylvania Dutch mixed with East Coast and now Upper Midwest. So I kind of have a mix of everything. But yes, Pennsylvania Dutch is a dialect of the German language. So that means it's not a written language. So whenever you hear Pennsylvania Dutch, it varies from region to region because it's a dialect and not written.
Do you feel like it's still like fading for you? Or do you still use it often enough to where it's very, okay, it's right there, still in your
So
in
my
your head?
husband and I use it together a lot because it's the language that we learn to know each other in. I do feel like it's fading a little bit for me, maybe because with all of the, this type of thing, and I'm on social media and I'm on YouTube a lot, I get to use the English language a lot more than I use Pennsylvania Dutch.
Have you ever thought about doing a video for your social media in just Pennsylvania Dutch?
So I've done this and it kind of backfired on me.
No way.
So the nature of social media is everybody gets to put their opinions out there. And because it's a dialect, I would say the words like, for grandma and grandpa. And even if I write this as Pennsylvania Dutch is a dialect, so it's going to vary from region to region. People would argue about that's not the correct way to say it. Like they would just criticize it. So I'm just like, okay, a dialect is not a good thing to put out there because everybody thinks like... If you understand a dialect, you know that it's going to change from region to region. That's the beauty of it, is that each little community has their own little words for grandma and grandpa, which in my community, it was mommy and daddy.
Oh, okay.
And people would argue about it. And I just don't like that on my, so I don't like to stir the pot, more or less.
Yeah.
But I do get requests on YouTube. Can you say a phrase in Pennsylvania Dutch? So I do sometimes, and I'm very honest with my viewers that sometimes I'm like, I know the phrase in Pennsylvania Dutch, and I just can't think of it in English. It mostly happens when I'm exhausted or tired, and then I want to revert to Pennsylvania Dutch because that's easier for me.
Can you introduce your family in Pennsylvania Dutch?
So mich und mein Mann haben 7 Kinder und wir sind geheiratet vor 25 Jahren.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful dialect.
Thank you.
Now, can you give us a mystery phrase? And we want to challenge you, viewers, if you can guess what Ruth had said.
So your mystery phrase is, wie bist du heute?
Ruth, what is one of the riskiest things that you've ever canned? And would you can it again?
So because I grew up without social media, without media, canning with my mom and my grandma, I didn't even know what the word botulism meant until I saw people policing on social media. So I think a lot of people would say everything I can is risky because I am somewhat of a rebel canner, even though I understand the science behind it. So when I do post my recipes online, I try to remember to say, this is the way my mom and grandma taught me. This is the way the USDA recommends, especially when there's a big difference. And I encourage everybody to learn the science behind the why, and then choose for yourself what you're comfortable doing in your kitchen and for your family.
Can you tell us what your typical day looks like from when you wake up to when you go to bed?
So because we've, created this lifestyle where we have a lot of chores, and our children also attend a private Christian school, so all the animal chores need to be done before they leave for school at 7:30. So we're usually up before 6, the whole household, and we're milking the cows, making sure everybody has food and water for that day. And then after 8, is kind of where, the kids are all off to school. And then I'll probably go in the garden. I prepare something for, our evening meal. So I'm looking at, okay, what do I need to do to get the evening meal ready? And then I'm usually working in the yard or the garden. And, because I have an online presence and a YouTube channel, I'm often filming, answering emails, and then or laundry. Laundry fits in there. So then after 3, when the children come home, I try to be done with all of the things, online, filming, editing, and we work on laundry and supper together, and of course yard work. And then we do have a few chores that need to be done before bedtime. But then we enjoy the evening meal together, and usually the rest of the day is just, the evening is kind of winding down and hanging out together. And
what would you say your bedtime is?
I'm usually in bed before 10. By 9:30, you probably won't be able to get a hold of me anymore. I'm usually out by 9:30.
And which makes sense for you to be able to, you'll have the energy to get up early in the morning.
Yes. And, we've been living this lifestyle for 20 some years. And of course, when I had babies, I wasn't getting up with the sun. Yeah. But I would say probably for the last 7 to 8 years, our life has been very routine where we're up with the sun. And so it makes it easy to go to bed with the sun. And the longer you live a certain lifestyle, the more it just really becomes who you are. And then the more time you spend outside during the daytime, the more your body becomes, gets in tune with sunrise and sunset.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was always a big question. Where do you fit in all the videos and editing? Because editing takes longer than the videos sometimes. On top of all the chores and everything else. So that was,
So it's a really good question, and I'm happy to answer it because it helps me to verbalize, because saying it helps me realize I've come to the point where I've been anxious to get to. So when I started filming and editing, whenever you learn a new skill, it takes so much of your brain power, almost to the point where I have to say to the children, you have to leave the room because I have to focus on this new skill I'm learning, right?
Yeah.
And so I told myself when we started YouTube that I wouldn't get frustrated and impatient with myself until I had been doing it for a whole year, because I figured it would take me a whole year for me to be able to edit while I sit at the kitchen table and parent at the same time.
Yeah.
And so that's what it looks like for me now. I try to do most of my editing when the children are at school, just because it's easier on my brain to not have to go from parenting back to editing, because I lose momentum when I'm like, okay, now where was I with cutting this, this footage? But having you ask the question made me realize that I'm very grateful that I've come to that point now, because more often than not, I now find myself editing at the kitchen table with a view into the kitchen where the boys are washing dishes. And when you have 3 boys in the kitchen, there's a parent needs to have eyes on this. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll be editing and watching them in the kitchen. So I'm glad you asked that, because it made me realize that I've gotten to that point where I can now multitask with my editing.
That's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You are from the Mennonite community, or were from the Mennonite community. Can you tell us what the Mennonite community is, or what being Mennonite means?
So the Mennonite community started with the Anabaptist movement, where they didn't believe in baptizing their infants. So, years and years ago. And it has evolved into being a deeply religious culture, where they shun modern things like technology. Even in my community, even driving cars, it's not allowed. And therefore the culture stays very separate from modern day America, and the communities stay separate. And when we left, it felt like we moved to a different country, because culturally we were so different.
Okay. Is Mennonite and Amish similar? Or
Very similar.
What are some of the similarities, or what could be some of the differences?
So there's very many Mennonite churches, right? On my social media, I get a lot of negative feedback because when I say Mennonite, they assume I mean any kind of Mennonite. But so I try to say the Old Order Mennonites. That's what the culture I grew up in was. And the Old Order Mennonites are often referred to as the horse and buggy Mennonites because they drive horse and buggy, very similar to the Amish, what most people recognize as the Amish. One of the differences was we had electricity in our homes, and most Amish do not. But we didn't drive cars, and we didn't have any media, so no television. And I do think as a child, and even as an adult now, that's what sets most Mennonites apart from the rest of their peers in the modern world, is they didn't grow up with media or television, so their childhoods were basically just play and work. And I feel like even my peers in the modern world, even my best friends, I feel like that's one of the biggest differences. Like movie references, I don't get it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you want to keep some of that with your kids? Like the fact that maybe not immerse them into so much of the maybe TV shows and all of that? Or do you feel like you want them to know some of that? So
it's a very good question, and one that I try to be sensitive in the way I verbalize my answer to this question. But that's our homestead, our farm, our family culture. At the root of that is a conversation that my husband and I had soon after leaving the Mennonites, when we noticed the big difference between the way we were raised and the way our peers in the modern world were raised. And we asked the question, what can we do to make sure that our children have the same kind of childhood that we had? And so part of that was they need chores, right?
Yes.
Because that was the one thing that my husband and I could both say, here's what made us different. We had to get up and milk the cow before we went to school. That's what made us different. So there was very concrete things that we could put our hands on. So we bought baby chicks for our 3 and 4 year old, daughters, and that was their chores. So then our homestead kind of evolved like that. The more children we had, the more animals we needed, so that everybody has chores.
Yeah.
And so then when we started realizing the nutrition and health benefits, it just snowballed into what you see now. I think I'll spend the rest of my life unpacking exactly what happens inside the developing child, the developing brain when they have chores. Yeah. But as of now, I just know that having a lot of chores is 1,000 times better than having a device.
I would have to agree, because I know that I've noticed with my kids growing up, as they're getting older, the more that they feel relaxed, the more I see pushback towards me. When they're a part of the family, I feel like they see that difference when they have to help out with someone. But I know that every family has their own, their own little, you can say their own little kingdom to where they're growing.
Culture.
Yes.
Yeah,
their culture.
Family culture. One of the questions I often get is, well, I don't have room for animals. How do I make sure my children have chores? And I always tell parents, they can do laundry, they can cook, they can clean. Your job, if you have children in the home, your job as a parent is to work yourself out of a job. Like, that is their chores, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to have a milk cow, but you also probably don't have 7 children. If you had 7 children, you might need a milk cow so you have enough chores. But if you have, 2 or 3 children, they can wash dishes, they can prepare meals, they can do laundry, they can mop floors. Believe me, they're going to grow up and move out, and you can do it to your heart's content.
Yeah. How many animals do you have on the farm?
So a lot of people talk about chicken math. We have cow math. So our most involved animals, the ones that take the most of our time and commitment, are our cows. So right now we have 2 milk cows, and then we have a heifer. which means it's a female cow that has not yet had a calf. So she will have a calf in June too. So we have 3 milk cows. And then, of course, to have a cow in milk, they have to have babies, right?
Yes.
So we have their babies, and then we have Fiona. Aww, the chickies. Oh, it's okay.
We figured that you've been away in Florida for so long that you missed.
This is what you guys have been so secretive about. I could tell. I am a boy mom. I could tell by the look on their faces that they were up to something. It made me nervous.
Okay, so one question we want to ask. So it starts off with little chicks.
It does.
Do your kids give your chicks names? Are they involved?
No. Well, they do give our animals names, but we have our chickens, we have too many. And when you buy production chickens, like when you're raising production chickens, they all look alike and it's very hard to name them. But recently we got a mix of laying hens from McMurray Hatchery, and they're all different. So they do name some of those. But all of our bigger animals, like our cows, have names.
So it starts from chicks. How does that look like when you have to go from this to
meat in the freezer? Okay.
And it gets to this, and then you have to, you need food, and it goes to food. So how do you handle that, especially with little children?
So all of our children, so we make it let's say when we buy baby chicks, we're very certain to say, okay, these are our laying hens. They'll be around for a while and we'll get eggs from these. Or if they're the meat birds, we'll say, okay, now these are all meat birds. Come August, we're going to harvest all of these.
So you let them know.
He's like, not me, don't harvest me.
But now that you've gotten a little bit of taste of home again.
Well, and then our children, all of them are required to be on deck on harvest day, but they can all help where they're comfortable. Yeah. So we're not forcing anybody to, do things that they're not comfortable with doing. And there's plenty of jobs on harvest day. So if you're just filling the ice water, that's okay.
Well, that's nice. It's nice to hear that there's that option for them.
Yes.
Look at this beautiful bird. She's just like calm.
Yeah, it's maturity.
Look at her.
Do you want water? Water?
Nope. Oh, do you see the?
Yeah, we need to clean up on aisle 1.
Clean up on aisle 1.
I'm a romantic at heart, so I have to ask, how did you and Alvin meet? And in the older Mennonite community, what did that look like leading up to marriage?
So because we have our own married children now and teenagers in the home, I've been thinking about this a lot, because when you experience something as a mother, you draw from experience that you had, right? Yeah. So I've been thinking about this, like, what was it like? Because I've even been explaining this to my teenagers. This is what it was like when your dad and I met. And I've been asking them for grace, saying, that's the only way I know. So in the Old Order Mennonite community, there's church rules about when the youth can hang out, when dating happens. So,
like a specific age? Okay.
So 17 is the age when you can start going to youth functions and, going to mixed events where there's boys and girls. And then you start pairing up, oh, I like him, he likes me, But of course you observe for a while, because weekends there's these functions for the youth, so you watch and you notice things. So Elvin and I was 17. Elvin was not yet 18 when he asked me out. And, there's rules. So yeah, if you say yes, then he comes over every Sunday night and you have a date in your home. So in my home, he stays from 7 p.m. to midnight. Those are rules over yes. So that's how we met. And then we got married at 20 and 21. So I was telling my teenagers, if I have certain boundaries and rules, it's because that's the only experience I have to draw from. And personally, I feel like it would be easier if our current church would have rules, because then I'd say, oh, that's the church rules.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm like, here's the boundaries that mom and dad are setting for you. Trust us. These are good for you.
Yeah. RuthAnn, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know that sometimes things like this can get personal, but something I know that we see that we can agree on is that work ethic for children is very important.
Yes, I would say work ethic is the base for which all other life skills are built upon.
Ruth, when you were a teenager, say 16 or 18 years old, did you ever think that you were going to go from canning for your family to canning for an audience online?
I never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that's what I would be doing now. But I think it evolved from, I first had to understand what people don't know. Mm-hmm. And that happened on Instagram. The more I showed on Instagram, the more questions I got. And I realized that long form video on YouTube anyway, because it stays there. People can go back and watch again. Where on Instagram, a lot, it disappears and it gets buried. So that's what drew me to YouTube, is like, oh, people don't know. And so that's where I started creating long form videos, is not for myself or for any self glory of any kind, but because I started understanding that most of what I know had gotten lost in the modern world because the previous generation didn't see the need to pass it on.
Yes.
The negativity doesn't affect me too bad, because the joy that I get in connecting with people, because living out in the middle of nowhere is very lonely. Mm-hmm. And, my children go off to school. So I really enjoy having an online presence, because I get to have a social life and I get to interact with people. And I've met some of my best friends online.
Would you describe your YouTube and Instagram channels as a hobby or as a source of income?
So it definitely started as a hobby, a creative outlet for myself, because I like to notice pretty things that bring me joy, and then I share it with I like to share the things that bring me joy with other people. But it's definitely turned into a source of income for our family. But I need to delegate the nuts and bolts of the source of income. I need to delegate most of that, because I get burned out. But as long as I can view it as a creative outlet for myself, I find joy in it every day. And it feels like a hobby to me, because I get to have that creative outlet and at the same time create an income for the family.
It would probably be nice because it's so different as opposed to the household chores, the daily life, and then...
Well, see, the beauty of it is, especially with YouTube, I can take what I do every day for the family and film it and put it on YouTube, and people find enjoyment and entertainment in it. So it's kind of like I get to use get to have a creative outlet and at the same time still take care of my family.
So how long have you been blogging now?
I have been on YouTube, I think, for 2 years. Maybe I've been on YouTube a little longer, but I've only been taking it seriously for about 2 years. I've been on Instagram for more, probably 4 or 5 years that I've been on Instagram with a purpose of, sharing and teaching.
What has been your favorite video that you've made so far?
I think my favorite video that I've made so far, in looking back, is the one where I make my grandma's recipe of Amish cinnamon rolls.
Okay.
Because cinnamon rolls is something that we make especially for special occasions, and it's a lot of time and effort and love that goes into it. And I feel like when I filmed it, all of that came through. The love of family came through in the cinnamon rolls.
I haven't seen that one yet, so I'm actually looking forward to checking that one out. Do you make it with sourdough discard, or do you make it with yeast?
So it's a yeast dough, but there's a secret ingredient, and you'll have to watch the video to find out what Grandma's secret ingredient was in her cinnamon rolls.
I'm looking forward to that. What would you say that your ultimate goal for your social media platforms are?
I really love the fact that in a busy world, in a noisy world, I can give a glimpse into a quiet and simple life. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have real lofty goals, as far as income or subscribers. I just want people to find peace and contentment in the videos that I share.
And how would you say that you handled the criticism part of that?
So I think having a lot of positive relationships in my life helps because I know who I am and I see that reflected in my relationships. But a key, I set boundaries for myself. And I try to have more, I have to have a balance of more in real life interactions like this and like our church community and my family, then I consume comments. So anytime I feel that balance just getting off a little bit, I understand that I have consumed too many online comments and not had enough in-person conversations and interactions.
We hear that you have written a book. Can you tell us a little bit about what that book is about?
So I'm under contract with Harvest House Publishers for 2 books. The first book is written and I've seen it all laid out. I've not actually held it in my hands yet.
That's going to be an exciting moment.
Oh, it will be. I'll be sure to film it so you can share in my joy. And it's called The Heart of the Homestead. And what it is stories and recipes and the whole heart behind why we do what we do.
And you said 2 books. So is there a second book?
So yes, the second book, and I've not made it a secret that the kitchen isn't my favorite place to be. My publisher convinced me that they want a cookbook for book 2. Book 2 will be released in fall 2026, and it is a cookbook. But my goal for the cookbook is just to have a whole bunch of basic recipes and to give people confidence that if I know how to make cottage cheese, then I can make all of these different recipes. And probably my favorite example so far is a basic pudding recipe, because the basic pudding recipe, if you understand that, you can make so many different dishes using that as your base. So my cookbook, it has taken heart in like I've realized where the heart is in the cookbook, and that I do have something that I want to say as a cookbook, but it's not going to be a cookbook like every other cookbook.
And so our viewers also have a chance to win an advanced copy of RuthAnn Zimmerman's book, The Heart of the Homestead. All you have to do is comment in this video below what your favorite part of this podcast was. And then we are going to be announcing our winner in June. So stay tuned. RuthAnn, how long have you been with Forjars?
I've been working with Forjars for over 3 years now.
What would you say that your favorite product is that we have made so far?
I think my favorite product is the lids, just because when you put in all that effort to can something and you get 100% seal rate, you're going to be going back for more of those. Oh, thank you, Hadassah. Thank you. Thank you, Forjars. So yeah, you're going to go back for more lids.
Let's talk about lids as we hold
all
the
right.
flowers.
Oh, they smell so nice.
Can you share a funny or memorable story with Forjars?
I think probably my favorite story of Forjars is when they asked me to be an affiliate, and I said, I'll share your product. I don't know how to be an affiliate. And we had multiple phone calls, and they walked me through and taught me how to be an affiliate. And for that reason, Forjars will always have a little special place in my heart, because I know when I come to something new, because, I'd rather be in my garden than learning how to be an affiliate. I can just call them and say, okay, how do I do this now? And they're willing to work with me on that.
And you're a pleasure to work with. So
thank you.
Lastly, what message would you like to leave with our viewers today?
So what I want to tell the viewers is, if you're learning a new skill, it takes time and brain space, and it feels overwhelming for a long time. And it's helpful to give yourself a time frame and say, I'm not going to decide if this works for us or not until such and such a date, because it's in the trying that we learn to understand. And it does take a lot of brain space to learn a new skill.
And that's wonderful advice. RuthAnn, are there any events that you're going to be at where some of our viewers will be able to see you at?
There's actually one right here in Florida that is coming up May 23rd through 25th, and it's the FPEA Homeschool Convention, and I'm so excited to be coming back as a speaker to that one. And then the first weekend in June is the Homestead Festival in Tennessee.
And we're going to be at the Homestead Festival in Tennessee as well. So come out and you can see both RuthAnn Zimmerman and Forjars. Where would people be able to find you online?
So online, every day I'm on Instagram. RuthAnn Zim is my Instagram handle, and I'm there every day. I don't plan my content, it's just whatever I'm doing. And then I'm on YouTube twice a week. Most weeks I'm there Wednesdays and Saturdays, and that is YouTube at RuthAnn Zim.
Thank you so much for stopping by and sharing with us. And we would like to thank our viewers for also tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to get notifications, especially when we come out with more canning recipes and also podcasts. So stay tuned to see who our next guest will be.